Hey guys, it's American Revolution time. I know you've been anxiously awaiting all of these great little videos that we put together. Once again, these videos are not meant to be the thing that is going to teach you everything that you need to know about the American Revolution, but they are supposed to be videos that I've put together for somebody who might be struggling a little bit to keep sort of straight which battle was which. Again, they're not all of the battles that were fought during the American Revolution, but instead basically the 10 that we focused most sharply on in class. And what better place to start than at Bunker Hill, aka Breed's Hill. They actually got up to Bunker Hill and said, you know what, let's actually go over to that hill over there, which by the way was Breed's Hill. So they get up there, they come up in the middle of the night, they start digging these trenches so that by dawn the next morning when the British wake up, they look up and go, holy cow, they have fortified positions. This is what we would call really the first organized military conflict. Washington is not there yet, but it is basically more than just a few guys in a little skirmish. We have dug trenches, we have built breastwork, we are ready to go. And the British are going to have to come up this hill and try to throw us off. They're going to do it. But the key thing to remember is we were having a lot of success, possibly, just possibly, if we hadn't run out of powder or ammunition up there, who knows what history would have been. But ultimately, that occurs in June 1775, as you can see on the slide here, just outside of Boston. It is clearly a one-sided victory. The Patriots do have losses there, but it is nowhere near the amount of losses that the British are going to suffer, and it also proves that we can stand toe-to-toe. We're not going to turn and run from the most powerful military force on the planet at the time. So once again, you know, the famous quote, the famous line, don't fire until you see the whites of their eyes. That command was given basically by Israel Putnam, who had also been a soldier during the French and Indian War, and he's telling his men not to fire because they don't have a lot of bullets. They've got to draw the enemy right in on top of them. And despite the fact that these pictures are really, really awful, and I apologize for that, but you can see here, basically they dug these ditches and they piled the dirt up on the side, and it allowed the men to stand down and give a smaller target for the enemy to shoot at. Again, there's that famous little line. I don't know, what is this? This is models. You know, these are pictures that I've taken off the internet, but ultimately what you're seeing here is you're seeing a military force lined up behind the breastwork or the dirt that was piled here, and the British would have to come up the hill towards their position in order to throw them off. It's not an easy task to do. So once again, another sort of image. You can look down into Boston Harbor from here, but you're getting a better sense of what Bunker Hill or Breed's Hill was all about. A lot of British are going to die here as the British repeatedly march time and time again on those Patriot positions until ultimately we know that the Patriots had to give up the land because they were out of powder, they were out of ammunition, and you know, the British send them running, send them packing. So now we move forward into you know, Fort Ticonderoga and Fort Quebec, led by a man named Benedict Arnold, who sort of shared the spotlight a little bit here also with a guy named Ethan Allen. If you remember Ethan Allen and the Green Mountain Boys, these are militia from Vermont who basically go to Fort Ticonderoga. It was a very loosely guarded British fort. Basically, Benedict Arnold and Ethan Allen kind of walk through the front door and very quickly overpower anybody who was on watch there. I'm going to try to move this down here because I'm seeing I'm cutting off some heads. You got an image here of Benedict Arnold. You've got an image here of Ethan Allen, quite a looker. And then you've got Daniel Morgan down here. And don't forget, you know, Daniel Morgan's going to have a few parts to play in this before it's all said and done. But they capture the British fort. Basically, you know, the commander comes out and says, by whose authority do you even come here? And he's telling them, you know, we come here because God gave us the authority and the Continental Congress. So the key thing to remember here is that with the cannons that they capture, they take a gentleman named Knox and send those cannons back over to Washington, who is at Boston right now trying to lift the siege. So ultimately, I will continue on with the theme of sort of Quebec. Benedict Arnold and his men continue up through the wilderness of Maine. It is an awful trip. We know that some of the men were like eating their shoes and eating the captain's dog. They're starving. But they do a Herculean task and finally do get up to the fort. When they get up there, it's miserable, wintry conditions. It's awful. But they decide, with time running out and many of their enlistees about to have their enlistments run out, that they better do something pretty quick. So they do this assault. Montgomery tries to go through, in a sense, the front door, and basically he is shot and killed by a cannon. And Arnold and Daniel Morgan are around the backside of the fort. They scale the wall. They do get in. But if you remember, you know, this grape shot was something that was fired out of a cannon, and immediately, this is an artist rendition here of Montgomery being killed. We know, see in the painting, he still has his head, so this must be a G-rated artist rendition, because ultimately this great shot kills Montgomery, and I believe the number was like 40 men in one shot, or injures them enough that it scares off that frontal attack, and all that's left is Benedict Arnold and Daniel Morgan and the troops that they're leading. These cannons were ferocious little things. You get a better idea here in this image. Quite a blast. And then here you're beginning to see that fire range that came out of some of them. So, in that story where Daniel Morgan scales the wall and sticks his head up just in time to have the cannon go off, burning his beard off, that had to be quite a scare that he had. But ultimately, they do get inside the fort. We know that they have a lot of success. Benedict Arnold almost pulls this off single-handedly, but he is hit by a ricocheting musket ball that takes him out. He tells Morgan, okay, fine, go on without me. Morgan continues on to the fort where he gets to a point and he waits for Montgomery to show up, but Montgomery's not coming. He is the headless horseman out front. So unfortunately, Morgan waits there too long, and the troops inside the fort basically gather up around him. They have Morgan and his men surrounded. Morgan refuses to surrender until finally he sees, basically Morgan is the last guy to give up his gun, until he sees a priest gathered in the back of the crowd, and he finally says, "Priest, come forward. I will give you my gun because I will never give my gun to a British soldier." So it's kind of an interesting little story there. Ultimately, moving forward, then you've got the Siege of Boston. And the Siege of Boston isn't really much of a battle in the sense that what we have is Washington has this dilemma. Okay, he's got all these ships gathered out in the Boston Harbor, and what can he do to drive them away? Just shake his fist at them? Well, thankfully, if you remember, you've got Knox dragging the cannon captured at Fort Ticonderoga to Washington's location there in Boston. This would change things. If Washington can have some cannon there, he'll have the upper hand because he already holds the high ground at Dorchester Heights. So finally, the cannon are dragged through, and that is also an incredible story about all the hardships that they endured trying to drag these cannon from this place. But they do finally get to the point where today, this is the plaque that stands on the site. Through this place passed General Henry Knox in the winter of 75 and 76 to deliver to George Washington at Cambridge the train of artillery from Fort Ticonderoga used to force the British Army to evacuate Boston. Again, it's a little oversold because we know that the British had already been given orders to leave Boston. This just sort of hastened them along. Once these cannons are placed on the heights, then you've got the high ground. Those British ships are going to have to leave. Okay, so I know it's not a huge deal. As I said, it is not going to be some huge lesson in education for you, but hopefully it just sort of stirs the facts up in your head enough that you can remember the details of the story a little bit better. Okay? All right, for right now, that's it. We'll keep it short and sweet, and we'll see if we can't upload 3 more little in the next couple of days.